Welcome to Interface program. We have today Dr. Anil Kakodhar, who is a legendary luminary in the field of nuclear reactor design in India. He has been part of grand design of this Indian nuclear regime. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, will you be able to tell us, I know you are a mechanical engineer by profession, you started your career, how you got into the nuclear physics and nuclear reactor design?
Well, after I graduated in mechanical engineering, in those days engineers were in great demand, and industries used to come offering jobs rather than we having to go to industry. But all one could do in industry at that time was either to get into some industrial engineering kind of activity or some marketing activity and several such things which were to my mind very repetitive in nature.
Okay.
And they were actually very repulsive for me. There was not much of a design, there was not much of developing new things. And so I felt I must get into a place where I will be able to do new things every day. And in Mumbai, where I was at that time, BARC was one such place. So I decided to join BARC training school.
Okay.
And BARC training school, of course, they teach nuclear engineering, nuclear sciences from a very broad perspective. And so that's where I got my first exposure to nuclear physics, or for that matter radiation physics and allied subjects, along with of course several advanced engineering subjects. And then I got into reactor engineering program, and development of nuclear reactor is it's a development of a complex system which has an interplay of neutron physics, radiation, structural engineering, thermal hydraulics, control theory, and so on and so forth. So I had to learn all these subjects. So that's how I got into this.
So how tough was, for example, because our existing scenario was not that good probably, because we can expect. So how tough was to develop new things for?
Well, it was tough. Surely it was tough, because doing things in India or doing new things in India is not so easy. At least at that time it was not so easy. But also it was an interesting challenge, and I think life became quite exciting
At that time,
as a result of that. So I enjoyed every moment of it.
Okay. As you were advocating this nuclear energy, peaceful use of nuclear energy throughout your career and even now, so what are, I mean, like after Chernobyl, for example, people find, I mean, more reasons to oppose, and after this Fukushima, now Japan and Germany is trying to shut down their facilities. So how do, in an Indian context, how do we see those things? I mean, like, are we easy to take such a decision that we won't do anymore?
Well, let's look at it this way. First, I think let's look at situation in the context of Chernobyl and Fukushima, and then we will come to how countries decide their program, because different countries decide it differently. See, Chernobyl, the reactor Chernobyl 4, which got into this accident, was designed in a manner which nobody would design it today, and there are some ground rules for design. For example, today you cannot design a reactor without a hermetically sealed containment. Chernobyl had at best a confinement. It didn't have the so-called strong pressure withstanding hermetically sealed containment. Similarly, there are certain regimes in the operation of that reactor which were known to be unstable, and so obviously one has to have very rigid rules for operating the reactor under such. First of all, such unstable regions should not be there.
Yeah.
But if they are there, there must be some very rigid rules for operation. In Chernobyl, actually, there are a lot of violations in terms of operating in that region. They wanted to conduct a particular test. So the short point is, even at the time when Chernobyl accident happened, that kind of reactors didn't exist anywhere else in other countries. Because the world as a whole, the design rules were made much more rigid, much earlier. Second thing is, let us look at the consequence of Chernobyl. Certainly there was actually a huge chemical reaction as a result of a sudden large energy release in the nuclear reactor, nuclear energy release, but which causes temperature to rise. That led to a reaction between graphite and steam, and that generated explosive gases which exploded, and that blew off the containment. And of course, significant activity was released in the atmosphere, and there was a large displacement necessary to protect people. Dousing of fire was a big problem, and so there are several firefighters who had to go very close even as this accident was taking place, that fire was taking place. And some people had to lose their lives, some people had to get excessive radiation exposure. But I'll come to displacement in a moment. But in terms of fatalities, I think around 65 people died as a result of Chernobyl accident. There is always a fear about radiation. You know, whenever you talk about radiation or nuclear accident and all something, you suddenly get an image of Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Even media, when they will describe even a simple radiation event, they will describe like a mushroom cloud. So it's a fact is that in public mind those images are there, and so you tend to displace people much more than necessary, and that in turn causes a public trauma, because you know, if you move let's say 1 lakh people, you are disturbing so many people. We know in other kind of disasters, cyclone, earthquake, when you have to move people to some shelters, it's a trauma. They want to return back to their homes. So Chernobyl did cause a very severe trauma. Now, nuclear industry has been always learning from experience. 3 Mile Island accident happened. Industry wide there was discussion, some new standards came in. Following Chernobyl, again a whole organization came into existence, World Association of Nuclear Operators, essentially to make sure that the safety of the nuclear power plants worldwide would go up. And actually there are measurable evidence to say that the safety of nuclear reactors did go up. Then Fukushima happened. Now Fukushima, of course those reactors were old, but Fukushima happened primarily because there was this tsunami. And that tsunami killed maybe upwards of 20,000 people, or maybe even more. The reactor got damaged because of tsunami, but as a result of reactor damage or as a result of radiation released because of that damage, not one person, there is no fatality. Fukushima related to reactor, there is no fatality. There is some exposure, but I think the assessment today is that you would hardly see any health consequence out of that radiation exposure. So the causative factor for Fukushima was
completely different.
number one, a natural cause, way severe compared to the causative factor for Chernobyl. The damage or the consequences in Fukushima was much lower compared to Chernobyl. And even in Chernobyl, the consequences were actually much lower than what many people surmise to be. The health consequences arising out of Chernobyl have been reviewed. Immediately after an accident, immediately means some years after the accident, a medical team from all countries, international medical team, went around, studied. 10 years after, another team went and again studied. And the conclusion is that because large number of people were displaced and because their eating habits had to be altered, you know, young children were not given milk, fearing that milk will contain radioactive iodine. Same thing, you know, elderly people. So, people were living in a different place than what they are used to living. And all this happens as a result of some kind of compulsion, fear. So, there are actually psychosomatic effects.
Yeah.
And those consequences have been identified to be bigger compared to radiation related consequences.
Yeah.
So, what I am trying to say is no justification of any accident, including Fukushima, but the effects that we see, the inadequate information or understanding seems to have caused larger damage than the actual consequence. Now, there is this, you know, Germany, of course, see, Germany had taken a decision to phase out nuclear reactors much earlier than Fukushima. And in my view, those reasons are political. There was significant presence of Green Party or that kind of mindset, political mindset. And I think there are some conditions of coalition, and as a result of that, they passed the...
more political than...
it was more political. They passed, the parliament passed the resolution that no more nuclear, they will phase out all the reactors. But when the date of phase out approached, they actually felt that no, we should keep these reactors running for some more time. And they actually refurbished some reactors. And they were about to be restarted with the new kind of determination. And then Fukushima happened. So, they actually, earlier they had a phase out decision, they had decided to stay on that decision or phase out that decision for time being. Because of Fukushima, they brought that back in. Germany is a country where, well, first of all, it's one of the advanced countries. Per capita energy use doesn't have to go up. And they have decided that they will pursue the renewable energy path, which is actually a welcome thing. And then, of course, that along with other energy forms. So, they have some strategy for their energy mix. Japan shut down all the nuclear reactors immediately following Fukushima. Then they carried out a big review, the regulations changed. But Japan parliament has actually decided to restart some of the reactors have been restarted already. And they have actually an official decision that nuclear energy will remain a part of their energy mix. So, they are not phasing out nuclear. We see the the images of nuclear energy that come to our mind is Hiroshima, Nagasaki. And Japan is the country which suffered that actually first hand. But their energy situation is such that they have determined that nuclear has to remain a part of their mix. So, the short point I am making is, first of all, if you really compare the risks of nuclear energy vis-a-vis any other energy production method, and you can get that in Google. Those numbers are available. Ask a question, fatality per unit of energy produced, and you look at all energy forms, you will find nuclear energy consequences are the least, even lower than solar, lower than wind. Now, this I think must be understood. India, we have a very large unmet energy demand.
Yes.
And as I was mentioning earlier on, the energy requirement, additional energy requirement of India is the largest compared to any other country in the world, including China. And so, we have to decide ourselves from where we will make that energy, and not from where we will get that energy today, from where we will get that energy say 40-50 years from now, when the other several energy forms may be facing a lot of volatility in prices. And so, it is in that context that nuclear energy is very important for India. And it is not as if there are countries where nuclear energy is growing very fast. China.
Yeah.
Between the time Fukushima happened and today, China has commissioned several new reactors. Korea, they are growing new power. Russia, even UK is now planning to add another additional nuclear capacity. So, these are, I think, country specific decisions, and we should of course keep on improving the safety of nuclear reactors. For example, following Chernobyl, we also had our own reviews, and while we strengthened safety of existing reactor systems, we also designed advanced heavy water reactor, which is designed with one of the criteria there is to virtually eliminate consequences in public domain. So, so these advances can take place, and so I think we should look at these issues scientifically and come at our own solutions. And that's the short.
Yeah, the fear has to be thrown out.
Fear has to be, of course. First of all, people who know this subject, they must understand, and people who do not know, they must be informed. Because that there is a fear in public mind is a fact, and so it must be addressed.
So, in the Indian scenario, what should be our strategy? Like, I mean, to what percentage increase should be there in the nuclear and other alternative energy sources over a period of time?
Yeah, see, the question is, today our energy, if you say electricity, is mostly based on coal. If you talk about energy, then it is based on, of course, crude and several products which come out of crude through processing in the refinery, petrol, diesel, kerosene, naphtha, and so on and so forth, gas. Now, this cannot continue indefinitely. First of all, we have the climate change issue. Secondly, these sources are not inexhaustible. They will get exhausted. And for example, oil prices, today they are rock bottom, and they may come down even more, but there was a time when it had gone more than $100 a barrel. It can happen again. Maybe it will not happen in next few years, but it can happen again. And we all know how critically dependent our economy is on such. Now, indications are that next 15-20 years, we will need to import energy in much larger quantities than what we are importing today. Our import bill may be several times. I think we may have to import 5 to 7 times more energy than what we are importing today, and the bill will be much higher because costs at that time may be much higher than what they are today. So, whether you look at it from greenhouse gas or climate threat point of view, or look at it from sustainability point of view, if you now look at what energy resources we can put our bet on, what energy resources will take us safely through future, and these are, anybody can do a simple back of envelope calculation because this data is all available. We will come to the conclusion that you have to take recourse to nuclear and solar, because these are the two large energy sources which can meet our energy requirements, which will be there in say 20, 30, 40 years from now. And so we must work towards expanding these resources. And now question is, why both, why not one? And that, see, you always require a mix. You can't put all eggs in the same basket. And particularly solar and nuclear, they are complementarities. Nuclear, you can operate 24/7. It's a base load generation. Solar, you can get only when sun shines. It is intermittent. A sudden cloud movement will dip. And so it is. It cannot meet the requirement of the base load generation. And you want, if you want your grids to be stable, there is a minimum base load generation necessary in the grid. Otherwise, the grids won't be stable. On the other hand, for decentralized use, solar is ideal. So I think we need a good mix. And so I would see over a period of time, we would have conditions 50% solar, 50% nuclear. And that's what I would imagine.
Coming back to the nuclear explosions that we had, we always stated that, I mean, our reactions and the experiments were for the peaceful processes. So immediately it was followed with different kinds of sanctions. So how difficult was that immediately after sanctions or with that sanctions in developing newer technology in India?
Well, it of course was difficult because when you have restrictions to access technology, more than technology you can develop yourself, but some materials you require, and if you don't have, then there is always a challenge, because you have to work around different materials to achieve the same objective. So it was a challenge. There is no issue about that. But I think, and that after you conduct the PNE experiment of 74 or the nuclear tests of 1998, that there will be more sanctions was known. So it's not as if it was unexpected. Look at it the other way. We have to use our technology in our interest. In 71, I don't want to get into the political part of it, but seeing purely in objective technological terms, I think India had never any intention of developing nuclear weapons. Although everybody knew that there could be a need one day, so that option was always kept open. There was an option kept open, but not to really move in that way. That was the mindset. It was so whenever it came to conditions where the options are likely to be closed, we stayed away. We didn't sign NPT, and several things that followed. But not that we went ahead and developed, because there was a date after which those who had done the test before this were weapons. If that mindset was existed, I think that could have happened at that time. And it was expressed also that we have that capability, but it was not done. So I always call India as a reluctant nuclear weapon state. It became necessary because it was clear that to protect our security, only we have to do something. Nobody else is going to help us. And we have gone through several stages where we have seen that security becomes vulnerable. And So I think there was a time when it became necessary that we should exercise that option. But having said that, I would also say nuclear weapons are weapons of deterrence.
They are not designed for attacking first.
So weapons of deterrence are actually weapons of peace, because we want deterrence to hold.
Yeah.
The problem will arise when deterrence fails. Then you have to. So I think it was a necessary thing for us to do. After that, of course, there were a lot of restrictions. The sanctions became tighter. But our development went on. World realized that you cannot stop India by putting restrictions like this. And so, after some time, we had this condition. People also want to interact with us. They knew that India is technologically becoming, better and better. In fact, there is a testimony in US Congress, one of the committees of US Congress, where it was said that there are some aspects in fast reactor program of India where US can learn from India. So again, I will not go into the politics of it, but the net result was that the embargo was dismantled, NSG restrictions were removed, and India started getting access to technologies. Now see what has happened. 47 we got political independence, right? We had serious economic crisis around 90s, early 90s. And then you had this new economic reforms. And country's economy started moving forward from that point. And there may be ups and downs, but the economy is still moving forward. So you can categorize that as economic liberation of the country in some way. Similarly, post 2005, 2006, when India entered into international civil nuclear cooperation and the technology control went away. Now, we have our self-reliant program, domestic program, we will carry on, no restrictions, we are not compromised that. But we can now access nuclear technology, defense can access defense technology, kind of computers which were in market. Earlier only low-end computers were in the market, high-end computers were never coming to India. Today they are coming. So I think we are now in an era of technological liberation. So you imagine that if this was not done, do you think this would have happened? No way. So I think and technological liberation is so important for competitive progress of the country. And that happens only when you develop technology, you become technologically strong and make sure that the world has to recognize that. So that is what has happened.
And what is future in our fusion technologies?
Well, the fusion, there is, fusion energy program in India is actually going on for last, I think, several decades. The Institute of Plasma Research at Gandhinagar has been spearheading this effort, but there are other labs where fusion work is happening. As a result of, they started with an Aditya tokamak, and now they have the SST1 superconducting steady state tokamak, which is actually a very important development in fusion technology. So world community, the countries which are advanced in fusion technology, they recognize that India is an important player in this technology. So we were invited and we became members on that ITER project, International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. And we are, there are other countries which are also there. Now together the plan is to build this facility, which the construction is currently going on, and a very large section, about 1/9 of that reactor components, would be actually built in India. And obviously this runs into a few thousand crores.
Yeah.
So all these equipment are being done in Indian industry. So our industry is able to learn future technology today.
Yeah.
You know? And also the technology is transparent to us, not just the system that we do, but also other systems.
Yeah.
So I think it's a way for us to leapfrog in this technology. However, for fusion technology to actually produce electricity and provide to people, it may take quite some time. But I think it's important because that's the ultimate source of energy as per the present day perspective.
Yeah. So I have read similarly the technology that we use, thorium based technology, it is not, I mean, India is far ahead compared to other states. So is there any possibility of our interaction with others in developing this further to use, or are we, I mean, in a position to completely
No, we will do this ourselves. Not that we don't want to interact, but I think, see, we already have a small reactor operating at Kalpakkam, which runs on uranium-233, which is derived from thorium. We also completed the development and design of a 300 megawatt thorium power plant. I mentioned to you about this advanced heavy water reactor, which was designed with an objective of virtually no impact in public domain, because it was designed after Chernobyl, so we have to address that issue. But another objective of that reactor is to produce a large part of energy out of thorium. This design is actually ready. Development is almost complete, and I hope that we will start construction pretty soon. Now, we are clearly most advanced in this technology in the world, and we have the capability to build this whole system on our own. But I also believe that see, we have to do this because we are very short in uranium, and so eventually we have to change over to thorium. That's what our 3-stage nuclear power program is aimed at. And we have to do that in sequence. First uranium reactors, then fast breeder reactors, and finally thorium reactors. So, large scale deployment of thorium, there is time. We have to build fast reactor capacity and then do that. But as a technology demonstrator, AHWR, I think the construction should start pretty soon. The world as a whole also, if not today, tomorrow, they will also feel that same need, because the only thing is their need will come much later than ours. So we should interact, and certainly we could become a major technology provider to the world in the context of thorium. So I think interaction we must, but not that we are dependent on that interaction.
For the younger generation, what are the opportunities to getting into this nuclear field and the business of doing more and more, I mean, empowering the nation through nuclear reactions?
Well, I think there are plenty of opportunities. We have in the Department of Atomic Energy a system of training school. There is a training school at BARC, and then there are branches of BARC training school at different places. For example, at Kalpakkam, at Hyderabad, at Narwa Prahar, at Indore, several places. And each place in BARC, maybe around 100 trainees, both scientists and engineers, are taken into this orientation program. Other places 30, 40, 50, like that. NPCIL, which is the company which kind of designs, constructs, operates nuclear reactor, they run their own school. So I think there is a large intake that takes place in different atomic energy programs in the country. So that represents one opportunity.
Huge opportunity.
Then there are large programs for future development, because as I told you, it's a research program. Following that, you have to develop technologies, and then following that, you have to deploy. So we are certain technologies are in deployment phase, certain technologies are in technology development phase, and certain things are in the domain of research. So you require people of all capabilities, physics, chemistry, even biology, engineering, almost all streams of engineering, and there is a large scope in this entire program. And I think today there is enough dynamism in the human resource development program. There is also this Homi Bhabha National Institute, where a lot of people do research at PhD level, and there one of the major thrusts is to do PhD on the interface of a new research, new scientific research, and its translation to technology product. In India, this capability is very little, and countries which are technologically very advanced, they have very strong capability. They bring out technologies which are based on latest in research, and we need to develop that capability, and HBNI has that as the main thrust. So it's, as I said, it's a very kind of active system for human resource development, and plus I think through Board of Research in Nuclear Sciences there are linkages, research linkages with universities, and board's activities today are much bigger than what they were earlier. So I think there are opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Anil Kakodhar, for your kind time spent with us. I really enjoyed it. I hope you also. Thank you.
Thank you.